If you have been watching this channel for any amount of time, you know that I do not use the word historic lightly. I do not throw around phrases like dangerous outbreak or life-threatening situation just to get your attention. I say those words when the atmosphere is genuinely telling me that something serious is coming, and right now, as we head into the first week of April, the atmosphere is telling me something very serious is coming. The severe weather pattern that briefly retreated over the last couple of weeks is back. It is back with a vengeance. And the setup that is now coming into focus across the central and eastern United States over the next several days is one that every person living between the Rockies and the Appalachians needs to be paying very close attention to. April is not a month you want to be caught sleeping when it comes to severe weather. Statistically, April ranks as one of the 2 or 3 most active tornado months of the entire calendar year. And the reason for that is simple. By early April, the Gulf of Mexico has warmed enough to begin pumping extremely rich moisture northward in earnest. The jet stream is still running strong and fast across the southern and central plains, and the contrast between Arctic air retreating to the north and warm subtropical air pushing up from the south creates an atmospheric battleground that is absolutely ideal for supercell development. Every single one of those ingredients is present right now. They are all aligned at the same time. And the result is a severe weather pattern that I believe is going to produce some very significant events before this week is over. I want to spend the first part of this forecast talking about the large-scale pattern, because if you understand what is driving this setup, you will understand why meteorologists are taking it so seriously rather than treating it as just another spring storm. The key player in all of this is a massive upper-level low-pressure system that has been spinning over the western United States for the past several days. Upper-level lows like this one are what we call cutoff lows, meaning they have essentially separated from the main jet stream flow and gotten stuck over the same general region for an extended period. As this system finally begins to move eastward and get picked back up by the jet stream this week, it is going to release an enormous amount of stored atmospheric energy across the central plains. Think of it like a dam that has been holding back water. When that dam breaks and all that energy starts moving, the downstream effects are dramatic. At the same time, a surface low pressure center is going to develop and rapidly deepen across the lee of the Rockies, somewhere in the vicinity of southeastern Colorado and southwestern Kansas. Rapidly deepening surface lows are one of the most important ingredients for severe weather outbreaks because they intensify the low-level jet stream, they strengthen the warm and moist air advection out of the Gulf, and they sharpen the boundaries, the fronts, and dry lines, along which supercell thunderstorms ignite. When you have a rapidly deepening surface low combining with a vigorous upper-level trough and extraordinary moisture pooling across the southern and central plains, you have a recipe for severe weather that meteorologists take very seriously, and that is exactly the recipe we are working with this week. Now let me get into the specifics of each day, because this is going to be a multiple round event, and the peak danger is going to shift geographically from one day to the next. I want every person watching this to know exactly when their area faces the greatest threat so you can prepare accordingly. The first round of this outbreak is already beginning to come together today, and if you are living across the central and southern plains, I need you to have your guard up this afternoon and evening. A dry line is going to surge eastward across western Texas and Oklahoma during the midday, and early afternoon hours as temperatures warm and the cap begins to weaken. And along that dry line, the atmosphere is primed for explosive thunderstorm development. What I mean by explosive is that storms that fire along this boundary today have the potential to go from nothing to severe in a matter of 15 to 20 minutes. And once they are severe, the environment supports them staying that way for a long time. The Storm Prediction Center has highlighted today's threat with an enhanced risk of severe weather, covering a large area of the southern and central plains, including portions of western and central Texas, all of Oklahoma, southern Kansas, and even extending up into southwestern Nebraska. That is a massive enhanced risk area, and it reflects the widespread nature of today's severe weather potential. The primary threats today are going to be significant tornadoes, very large hail, and destructive straight-line winds. And I want to be specific about the tornado threat because it is the most life-threatening component of today's setup. The wind shear profiles I'm looking at for this afternoon across central Oklahoma and north central Texas are exceptional. Storm relative helicity values, which measure the atmosphere's ability to produce rotating updrafts, are in ranges that I typically associate with significant tornado days rather than marginal ones. Any supercell that develops in this environment today is going to have a very high probability of producing a tornado. And given the depth of instability and the strength of wind shear, a violent tornado, EF3 or stronger, is absolutely within the realm of possibility across portions of this region today. That is not hyperbole. That is what the atmospheric data is showing. For timing today, the first storms are likely to fire along the dry line somewhere between 1 and 3 o'clock this afternoon, local time across western Oklahoma and the Texas Panhandle. Those initial storms will be the ones to watch most closely because they will be discrete, meaning they will have the entire unstable air mass to themselves without competition from other storms, and that gives them the best chance of organizing into long-track supercells. By 4 o'clock through 7 o'clock this evening, I expect storm coverage to expand significantly as additional storms fire along the cold front pushing down from the north and the dry line surging east across central Oklahoma and northern Texas. This window from 4 to 7 this evening is what I consider the peak tornado window for today across central and eastern Oklahoma, the Dallas-Fort Worth area northward, through the Oklahoma City metro, and the Wichita area. People in these communities need to be indoors and sheltered with weather alerts active during this time frame. After sunset tonight, the individual supercells will likely begin merging into a larger convective system, and as that happens, the tornado threat will trend down, but the wind threat will trend sharply up. A bowing squall line producing wind gusts of 60 to 75 miles per hour is very possible across eastern Oklahoma, eastern Kansas, and southern Missouri during the late evening and overnight hours tonight. And I want the communities of Tulsa, Joplin, Springfield, and Kansas City to be aware that damaging winds are possible even after the peak tornado window has passed. Power outages from straight-line wind damage tonight are going to be a very real outcome across parts of the mid-continent, and I want you to have flashlights and backup power sources ready before any of these storms arrive. The second and most significant round of this outbreak comes tomorrow, and I have been staring at tomorrow's setup for the better part of 2 days now, and my concern level has only been going up. I want to walk you through why tomorrow is so alarming, because the combination of factors that is coming together is genuinely rare even by April standards. The upper-level trough that I mentioned earlier is going to be ejecting rapidly to the northeast by tomorrow afternoon. And as it does, it is going to interact with what will be an extraordinarily favorable boundary layer across the lower Mississippi Valley and Tennessee Valley regions. Overnight tonight, a low-level jet is going to develop and strengthen across eastern Texas and Louisiana, and that low-level jet is going to pump incredibly rich Gulf moisture northward across Arkansas, Tennessee, and Mississippi through the overnight hours. By the time the sun rises tomorrow morning, the dew points across this region are going to be in the upper 60s and potentially touching 70 degrees Fahrenheit in some locations. Dew points of 70 degrees in early April are remarkable. They represent a level of atmospheric moisture more typical of midsummer in the Gulf states. And in combination with the violent wind shear that is going to be in place tomorrow afternoon, those extreme dew points translate directly into an extreme tornado threat. The Storm Prediction Center has already indicated a moderate risk of severe weather for tomorrow, which, as I mentioned earlier, is not issued casually. But here is what I want you to understand about tomorrow's setup that goes even beyond just the risk level, the atmospheric parameters. I'm looking at for the Tennessee Valley region tomorrow afternoon are in the top few percent of all severe weather days in the historical data set. Significant tornado parameter values, which combine instability, wind shear, moisture, and other factors into a single index, are projected to be well above the threshold for major tornado outbreaks across portions of western Tennessee, northern Mississippi, northern Alabama, and potentially into western Kentucky. When those parameter values are this high across a populated region, the historical record tells us that the outcomes tend to be severe. I need to address directly the communities in this region because you need to hear this. If you live in Memphis, if you live in Jackson, if you live in Tupelo, if you live in Corinth, if you live in Paducah, if you live in Huntsville, tomorrow is a day that warrants your full and complete preparation and attention right now, not tomorrow morning when the storms are already forming. Tonight, before you go to sleep, I want you to identify your shelter location. If you are in a slab-on-grade home, a bathroom or interior closet on the lowest floor is your best option. If you are in a basement home, get to that basement the moment a tornado warning is issued for your area. If you are in a mobile home or manufactured housing of any kind, please make arrangements tonight to be somewhere else, tomorrow afternoon and evening. I'm not trying to alarm you unnecessarily. I am telling you what the data says. And the data says that tomorrow is a day where being in a mobile home during a significant tornado is an extremely dangerous gamble. The timing for tomorrow's main threat is going to be split into two windows, and I want to explain both of them clearly. The first window will be during the morning and early afternoon hours, as the remnant boundary from tonight's storms sets up as a stationary front or outflow boundary across portions of Tennessee and northern Mississippi. Boundaries like this one act as focus points for tornado development because they enhance low-level wind shear right along them. And in tomorrow's environment, a supercell that tracks along or near this boundary could produce a significant tornado very quickly after developing. This morning window is going to be most relevant for western Tennessee and northern Mississippi from roughly 9 in the morning through 1 in the afternoon. The second and more widespread window for severe weather tomorrow is going to unfold from roughly 1 o'clock in the afternoon through sunset as the main cold front accelerates into the region, and additional discrete supercells fire ahead of it across Alabama, Georgia, and the Western Carolinas. I want to highlight this afternoon window for the southeast specifically, because I think it tends to get underappreciated in outbreak forecasts that focus heavily on the plains. The atmosphere across Alabama and Georgia tomorrow afternoon is going to be extraordinarily dangerous, and I mean that in the truest sense. The instability values projected for this region tomorrow afternoon are higher than what we saw during several significant tornado outbreaks in recent memory, and the directional wind shear is going to be exceptional as well. Any storm that fires in northern Alabama or northern Georgia tomorrow afternoon is going to be in an environment that strongly favors violent tornadoes, and I want Birmingham, Huntsville, Decatur, Gadsden, Rome, and Chattanooga to be treating tomorrow afternoon with the utmost seriousness. One thing I want to address specifically about tomorrow's setup that I think is critically important is the potential for tornadoes after dark. The cold front is going to be moving relatively slowly across the deep south tomorrow, which means some of the most organized discrete supercells of the day could still be ongoing across central Alabama, central Georgia, and potentially into South Carolina and southern North Carolina after sunset. Nighttime tornadoes are significantly more deadly than daytime tornadoes for a straightforward reason. You cannot see them. Even a large, violent tornado moving toward you at night is often invisible until it is dangerously close, and relying on the visual cue of a tornado funnel is simply not a viable safety strategy after dark. Your only reliable warning at night is an electronic alert, and that means your phone needs to be charged, the volume needs to be on, and you need to be using a reliable alert system that is going to wake you up if a warning is issued while you're asleep. Which brings me to something I want to take a moment to talk about directly, because it is especially important during a multi-day outbreak like this one. One of the biggest dangers during a week with several consecutive rounds of severe weather is something called alert fatigue, and it is a very real and very documented phenomenon. When people receive repeated weather alerts over multiple days, they begin to unconsciously tune them out. They start leaving their phone on silent at night because the alerts interrupted their sleep the night before. They stop checking radar because nothing happened the last 3 times they looked. And then the one time it actually matters, the one storm that is headed directly for their location, they missed the warning because they had mentally checked out. I do not want that to happen to you this week. That is exactly why I developed Max Alert, a personal weather alert service where I will call you directly on your phone when your precise location is inside a life-threatening warning polygon. Not a push notification that gets buried under your other notifications. An actual phone call from me when your specific location is inside a tornado warning, tornado emergency, flash flood emergency, or severe thunderstorm warning. Max Alert cuts through the noise of alert fatigue and makes sure that when it truly matters, you are reached. The service is only $14.95 for an entire year, and I cannot think of a better week to get it set up than right now before these storms arrive. Check the description below for the direct link. Now, I want to spend a few minutes on the third round of this event because I do not want anyone in the eastern United States to think they are off the hook just because the main outbreak is focused on the southern plains and mid-south. As the cold front associated with this entire system finally sweeps through the mid-Atlantic and northeast in the back half of the week, there's going to be a threat of severe weather, including damaging winds and isolated tornadoes across a corridor from the Carolinas northward through Virginia, Maryland, and into southern Pennsylvania and New Jersey. This is not going to be as organized or as intense as what the southern and central parts of the country will experience on days 1 and 2. But it is absolutely a real threat, and it is one that several million people need to be aware of. The timing for this eastern threat is going to be from late morning through early evening on day 3, and the primary concern is going to be a fast-moving squall line producing widespread damaging wind gusts of 55 to 65 miles per hour. At that wind speed, you are looking at widespread tree damage, downed power lines, and the potential for structural damage to poorly constructed buildings. The tornado threat in this region on day 3 will be secondary to the wind threat, but isolated tornadoes are possible, especially in the western Carolinas and Virginia, where low-level shear will be somewhat more favorable. If you are in Charlotte, in Raleigh, in Richmond, in Washington, D.C., in Baltimore, day 3 of this event is your primary concern, and you should have your alerts active and your preparations made before it arrives. I also need to briefly address the flooding threat that is embedded within this entire multi-day event, because it is easy to get so focused on tornadoes and severe thunderstorms that the rainfall flooding component gets overlooked, and that is a dangerous oversight. The moisture streaming into this system out of the Gulf of Mexico is extremely rich, and a storm strain, meaning multiple storms follow the same path over the same geographic area repeatedly, rainfall totals can climb very quickly to dangerous levels. Across the Ozark Plateau in Missouri and Arkansas, across the Tennessee River Valley, and across the Appalachian foothills in Alabama and Georgia, There's the potential for 3 to 6 inches of rainfall in a relatively short period of time during this event. Rivers and streams that are already near or above flood stage from recent wet weather are going to respond very rapidly to additional heavy rainfall, and flash flooding could become a serious threat across some of these areas. Please remember that flooding kills more people in the United States on average than tornadoes do every single year. Flooding is not a secondary concern, it is a primary concern, and you should never attempt to cross a flooded road regardless of how shallow it appears to be. Before I wrap this forecast up, I want to say something that I think about every single time I sit down to record a video like this one. There are people in the communities I just named, in Oklahoma City, in Memphis, and Birmingham and Charlotte, who are going to go about their entire day today without ever hearing any of this information. They are not going to check the Storm Prediction Center. They are not going to watch a weather channel. They are going to go to sleep tonight with no idea that tomorrow afternoon could be one of the most dangerous, severe weather days their region has seen in years. And that reality is why I do this. It is why I push out these forecasts as early as possible and why I cover these events as thoroughly as I can. Because the information that reaches you today gives you time to prepare, and preparation is what saves lives when violent weather arrives. So please share this forecast. Please send this video to your family members in the affected states. Please post it in your local community groups and neighborhood pages. The algorithm might show this to 100,000 people on its own, but if every person watching shares it with just 2 or 3 people in harm's way, we reach hundreds of thousands more. And every single person who sees this and takes it seriously is a person who's going to be better prepared when the storms arrive. Here's your final summary. Round 1 begins today across western and central Texas, Oklahoma, and southern Kansas with peak tornado and hail danger from 3 to 7 this evening. Round 2, the main event, unfolds tomorrow across the lower Mississippi Valley, Tennessee Valley, and deep south with extreme tornado potential, most severe from late morning through the overnight hours, with northern Alabama, northern Mississippi, and western Tennessee in the absolute highest risk corridor. Round 3 affects the mid-Atlantic and Carolinas on day 3, with a primary damaging wind threat and a secondary isolated tornado risk from late morning through early evening. Flash flooding is a serious threat throughout all 3 rounds across the Ozarks, Tennessee Valley, and Appalachian foothills. We will be live on this channel starting this afternoon as today's storms develop, continuing through tomorrow's main outbreak and into day 3 as the system pushes east. Subscribe right now and turn on all notifications so you are alerted the moment we go live. During an active tornado outbreak, real-time coverage is not optional. It is essential. I will see you in the live stream very shortly, and until then, please stay weather aware. Stay prepared and stay safe.